Welcome to the Mind Solution podcast with Sarah Maud. The Mind Solution podcast is for leaders like you who are passionate about well-being in the workplace because you understand that a strong, resilient and happy workforce is the key to your organisation's success. The Mind Solution podcast is here to help you. So join us every week where we'll share with you powerful insights, strategies and know-how to ensure that your people and your organisation are truly thriving from the inside out. Hello and welcome. This is your host, Sarah Maud, and I'm here today to explore what we mean by the term psychological safety. So this term, psychological safety, it's a bit of a buzzword that I'm hearing a lot of, particularly in the context of the workplace. And for organisations and business leaders creating psychological safety. So let's start by understanding, well, what does this term actually mean in the first place? Well, for me personally, if I was to put it into really simple language, the term psychological safety is feeling safe to be our true selves. And when we're being our true selves, we're sharing ideas, we're speaking out, we're voicing our opinions, we're expressing ourselves. We're sharing with other people what's going on with us, what we're feeling, what we're thinking. So for me, it's an expression of what's going on within us, and we're doing it in a way that it feels safe to be able to express ourselves. It feels safe for us to show up as our true selves, our authentic selves. Now, in order to do that, we need to feel that it's safe. We need to feel safe both within ourselves, and we also need to feel safe in our environment. Now, what does safety mean? Well, if I was to put this into the context of the survival response. So the one thing that your body is concerned with more than anything else at all is your survival. We are primed for survival. So the survival response is also known as the freeze, fight or flight response. And we're scanning at an unconscious level, we're scanning our environment 24/7 to make sure that we are safe. And the moment that we don't feel safe, we automatically kick in with the freeze, fight and flight response. Now, we don't need to think at a conscious level, shall I freeze? Shall I fight this perceived threat to life? Shall I run away? Shall I escape? It just happens, which when you think about it is incredible that we have that innate ability within us to decide in a millisecond what to do. Now, safety and survival, you might think, well, what is it that I've got to protect myself from when it comes to the workplace? Because the majority of us are not in positions where there is a threat to life. You know, if you were working, for example, in the armed forces, in the police force, in the fire brigade, is there potential in your day-to-day experience for there to be a threat to life, a real threat to life? Yes, absolutely. But for those that work in the corporate world, for example, is there a real threat to life? No. But do we still get triggered with that survival response on a daily basis? Yes. And what we're getting triggered by are what we perceive as threats. So if we've got somebody in our environment, in the workplace, that, for example, is being quite challenging with their behaviour, we can perceive that as a threat. So we're going to trigger the survival response. If we experience a conversation with somebody and we're experiencing that as a conflict, if we feel threatened in some way, can that trigger the freeze, fight and flight response? Yes. If we're put into a redundancy situation, if the organisation's going through a restructure, can that potentially trigger the survival response? Absolutely. Can, in fact, any kind of change where we are in a position where it's the unknown, that it feels unfamiliar, can any of that trigger the survival response? Absolutely. Can we be looking at our to-do list, our project list, and see that we've got 10 things that needed to be completed by the end of the week, and we just haven't got the space and the capacity to be able to do them? Is that enough to trigger the survival response? 100%. If we're having to address something with a team member that we don't feel comfortable addressing, maybe we lack experience or we lack confidence, we're not sure how the other person's going to take it. So say, for example, performance. If we need to have a performance conversation with somebody and we're worried about the outcome, can that be enough to put us in survival mode? Yes. So you can see that we are triggering the survival response all day, every day. And in fact, studies tell us that about 70% of people are actually living their life from the hormones of stress. And the stress hormones are what we create when we're in that survival mode. So when we're in survival mode, we create cortisol, stress hormone, we create adrenaline, noradrenaline. So we're in this primed survival mode where the only thing that we are concerned with is survival. So does that make for harmonious relationships? Does that make for ease and flow and great communication? No, it doesn't. So thinking about this term psychological safety, we need to feel safe. And the only person that starts with is us. So as individuals, as employees that form part of an organisation, we have to feel safe with us. Because you could be working for an organisation that actually the culture of that organisation is very supportive. It's kind, it's compassionate. That doesn't mean that you feel psychologically safe. Because what's triggering you to not feel psychological safe is your thoughts. And those thoughts might not necessarily be conscious thoughts, because we're operating from a level of the unconscious about 95-96% of the time. So if we don't feel safe in ourselves, if we're worried about the outcome, if we've got psychological blocks, psychological barriers to speaking out, to being our true self, then those things are going to prevent us from feeling safe. Whether that's feeling safe to put forward an idea about an alternative to redundancy, or whether that's us feeling safe to share with our manager what's going on for us in our personal life. It's all about what do we feel as individuals. And do we even recognise as individuals when we feel safe or we don't feel safe? You know, so many people are living in their head. So many people are disconnected from their body and have spent the vast majority of their life ignoring their emotions, ignoring what the body is trying to communicate with them, ignoring their feelings, or trying to distract themselves from their emotions, distract themselves from what it is that they're feeling with food or television or even work. You know, people that feel that they have to be busy all the time, that's a trauma-based response. So when it comes to creating psychological safety in the first place, in the work context, we need to educate people about the mind. We need to help to raise their levels of self-awareness, raise their levels of consciousness about who am I, and how to recognize what emotions are and where they're potentially getting emotionally hijacked. Where are they viewing situations and they are making them mean something that they're not? And what I mean by that is that everything that you are experiencing at any one time is 100% internally generated. So everybody has got their own internal reality. And that internal reality is based on the perceptual map and model that you carry around inside your neurophysiology. It's based on all of the experiences that you've had since the moment that you came into this world that have created filters. So all of the vast millions of bits of data that you're absorbing every single second, you are filtering that information, and you're filtering it based on everything that you've experienced, what it is that you've programmed your mind unconsciously, but you've programmed your mind to watch out for. So a really simple but powerful example. Let's imagine that you grew up as a child and you were very heavily criticized by a parent or both your parents or your parents and your teachers. Well, those experiences are going to create an impression. They're going to create memories where there would have been a high level of emotion attached to them. They're going to create an inner emotional blueprint. And especially if you were subject to that numerous times, you will have made that mean any number of things. But it's my guess that when you were in those moments of feeling criticized as a child and maybe feeling like you couldn't do anything but go into the freeze response because you couldn't fight back, you couldn't voice your opinion, and you couldn't take flight, then you might have just gone into the freeze response where you've experienced these situations and they've left their mark on your mind. And if we think about the way that the mind operates, is you're always scanning the environment. And when you're in a situation which reminds you at an unconscious level at something that you've experienced in the past, then boom, it's like you're back in the past. Because your brain's going, well, how did we deal with this last time? What was this situation about last time? Now, the situation could be very different, but if you're in a situation at work where you're perceiving that you're being criticized, is all of the totality of times that you've been criticized going to come flooding back into your body? Yeah, of course. Because you're back in what you are experiencing as a survival experience. So you might feel yourself in front of your manager or in front of your co-workers just kind of almost going into a bit of a freeze response where you don't feel safe to do anything other than just be quiet. Be quiet and take it. So when it comes to psychological safety, we have to feel safe within ourselves. regardless of the environment. As I say, the environment could be one that's very kind, it's very caring, it's very compassionate. But if we've got a whole back catalogue of experiences which haven't been processed, that maybe we're still caught in a bit of a trauma response, then those are going to create psychological blocks to you feeling safe, your employees feeling safe. And when you think about, well, what can we do as what can we do as organisations about our culture? For those individuals, it's not about the culture, because it's about their internal reality, that 100% internally generated reality. So the best thing that we can do to create psychological safety is, as I said, it's education. It's helping people to understand themselves, understand cause and effect, helping them to understand how they can manage themselves in the moment, how they can start to create different responses to what's going on. Because whatever we have experienced in the past is in the past. So something that's in the past, well, it doesn't exist anymore. But the thing that's keeping it alive is our focus of attention, the pathways in our brain, the conditioned, habitual and emotional responses to situations that we just naturally go into when we're in these situations that remind us of things that have happened in the past. So helping individuals to understand themselves, understand that cause and effect, teaching them about the mind, about the power of thought, can help to really empower and liberate your people so that they feel free, they feel safe, they feel more empowered. Now, the benefit of that isn't just psychological safety. The benefit of that is priceless. Because if you've got a whole team of people that are able to manage their internal responses to situations, well, that is priceless. Because that will create harmony. That absolutely will create more productivity. It will create better working relationships, both internally, externally. It will drive performance. It will create a much more engaged, happy workforce. And there are lots and lots and lots of ways that you can measure this. But if I was in your physical shoes, that would absolutely be my first starting point, is helping people to understand themselves. Now you might be thinking, well, how do we do that, Sarah? It sounds great, but how do we do that? Well, again, if I was in your physical shoes, then I would be looking at putting together a program, and I'm not even going to use the word well-being, because well-being, again, it's a word, it's a nominalization that's got lots of different meanings to it. But I would be putting together a program that encompassed this. Because if we don't understand ourselves, if we don't understand the mind and the body, then no amount of well-being training is really going to have its mark on you. That's just a bit like throwing jelly against the wall and hoping that it sticks. So I would be looking at creating a foundation of knowledge within my people about how do we operate as individuals, because we probably know more about how our smartphone works than how we work and operate as a human being. My second port of call, if I was an organisational leader, would be, okay, so once we've educated people, once we've helped them to feel safe within themselves, is to then look at our culture. Now, Organisational culture, I would suggest, is made up of a number of different facets. One of the biggest contributors to organisational culture is leadership and is leadership style. And in a very similar way, what I would be looking to do with leaders is create self-awareness. Because we've actually talked, or rather we've heard this term about being conscious leaders. And that's a wonderful image. If I think about, well, what does a team of conscious leaders look like? I'm like, oh yeah, that would be amazing. But again, given that as human beings, we're operating from the level of unconscious about 95%, how do you create a conscious leader? Well, that again, it comes down to self-awareness. And how do we create that level of self-awareness in our leaders? I would suggest that is about consistency. If I think back to my days when I worked in human resources, I worked in HR for about 12 years for a number of major organisations like British Airways, Virgin Atlantic, Debenhams when they were still going, e-bookers. I saw organisations investing thousands and thousands and thousands in leadership training. But what I saw is that it tended to be something like a 1 to 3 day leadership program. Now, if we think about behavioural change is not an overnight job. You know, if you've got a team of leaders that have never explored themselves, if they've never had any leadership coaching, if they don't have a level of self-awareness about how they're showing up every day, you're not going to achieve that overnight. Like the saying, Rome was not built in a day. So what I would be looking to do is to create a leadership program that wasn't a whole day program or a whole 3 day program, but I would break it down into modules. Now, one of the things that we've seen as an offshoot of COVID is online training. So, is online training also more cost effective? Yes, because we're not having to pay for conference rooms, we're not having to pay for flights, we're not having to do a lot of that. But breaking the training down into, say, 90-minute modules where you take your leaders on a journey. You take them on a journey of self-discovery. And again, if I was in your physical shoes, I would absolutely 100% combine that with leadership coaching. Because what leadership coaching will do for your leaders is it's like holding up a mirror. It's holding up a mirror to that individual to help them see what it is that they need to see within themselves about how they are showing up. Because a lot of people, again, because we're operating from the level of the unconscious, aren't necessarily aware of how they're showing up. Now, if I take myself back to when I worked in the world of human resources, I was an HR leader, I had a team. Was I the best leader? No. Because what I was, and I didn't necessarily see it, I was actually quite dominant as a leader. And especially when I felt under pressure, I would almost kind of go to the extreme in terms of dominance. And so did I always win hearts and minds and take my people on a journey with me? Unfortunately not. Did I get the job done? Yes. I was known for getting the job done. I was known for making things happen. I was known for having a lot of drive, a lot of energy. I was somebody that in many ways had a lot of great leadership qualities in that I thought big picture and I was very commercial. but I could have quite a dominant streak in me. And so I know from all of the work that I've done and the journey that I've been on in the last 10 years, that if I was to compare myself now to the person that I was, it's almost like seeing a different person in some respects. And I've had well over 300 coaching sessions. And those coaching sessions have helped me to continue to grow and evolve. Now, I'm not suggesting that your leaders are all going to need 300 coaching sessions. So before you start worrying about your financial budget for this, no. What would I do? Well, it depends on your leadership. It depends on the dynamics of the team. It might be that, I think for leaders, there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. Do I believe in consistency? Absolutely, 100%. But even at a very senior level, are leaders investing in themselves in the form of leadership coaching? Well, some are. And we can see the ones that have invested in themselves, because they're the ones that can create psychological safety within their teams, because they are self-aware. They understand themselves far more. They're aware of the signs and the signals that they're putting out to people. They know how to regulate their emotions. They're in touch with themselves. They don't have the same limiting beliefs holding them back. They're able to adapt their style so much more readily. They're able to win hearts and minds. They're able to create a shared vision and take people with them. They're not my way or the highway. So, coming back to the topic of psychological safety, it's looking at our leaders, looking at their leadership style and what it is that we want that leadership culture to be about, and how do we achieve that through a combination of leadership development training and leadership coaching. Now, the other thing that I would suggest creates psychological safety at work is also our systems and our processes. So I know from working with a lot of organisations, they're sometimes, when it comes to their own systems and processes, they're a bit discombobulated. They're a little bit, let's say they haven't really got what we would say is Kaizen going on. So if I think about Kaizen, if I take my mind all the way back to my HR degree and was learning about what Kaizen meant. Kaizen is the term for continuous improvement. And quite often people are having to deal with systems and processes in the workplace that really are not effective. They're very cumbersome, they may be very clunky, it might be that the software is very outdated, it's not streamlined. So all of those factors when it comes to systems and processes, that can have an impact on psychological safety, in that we are working in environments that are not conducive for our mental health. Now, it could be that some people have got ideas about what we could do differently, what can we do better, where can we improve how things are run, but they are not voicing it. And they're not voicing it because if we are in a culture where people are shot down, not literally, but they're shot down for having an idea, they're put down for having an idea, then they're not going to speak out again. If they voice something, and it's, even if it's not a brilliant idea, it's also about how that idea is responded to. You know, it reminds me of, I was actually in the gym a few weeks ago, and they've got, hair dryers and hair straighteners in the ladies. They might also have in the men, I don't know, but in the ladies changing area. And I'd noticed that the hair straighteners had been left on, and so I flagged down one of the attendants and I said, maybe what they need are signs to just remind people to turn these devices off. And this one lovely attendant, she said, we've told them, now I assume by them she meant the management team, we've told them so many times, but just nobody listens to us. And I really felt for this individual, because from a both psychological safety and an employee engagement perspective, are individuals like her going to keep voicing their ideas and their opinions about how things could be improved? No. So psychological safety is absolutely also just about listening to people. Do we really take the time to listen when somebody does have an idea? So you see, when we think about psychological safety, it's not just one term. It is really about a number of layers. But if you can create the insight, the awareness, and the culture where people feel safe, where they're expressing themselves, they're pushing forward ideas, the leadership team are sending out the right signals, they're being the change that they want to see in the workplace, then what are going to be the consequences of that? What will be the impact of that on your ability to retain top talent, on your ability to really have a strong workforce that really pull together as a team? I see on so many job adverts, you've got to be able to think creatively and be innovative. Well, that's great, but does your culture allow for that? And if it does allow for that, then, look at some organisations like Apple. Look at what they've achieved in terms of their products. If I think about their brand, they are absolutely known for creativity and innovation. And as a result, they're one of the most successful organisations in the world. So, as organisational leaders, if you want an organisation that really is successful, even more successful, then I would encourage you to just reflect on everything that I've shared in this podcast. And I hope that this podcast has been beneficial for you, that it's really given you food for thought about what you can do that creates psychological safety, and that you can see the benefits of that. And if this is something that we can absolutely help you with in terms of helping your individuals feel safe within themselves, that we can work with your leadership team, then absolutely get in touch with us at www.themindsolution.com, or just hop onto the link in this podcast and book your free consultation now. So thank you so much for being with me today, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye for now.